Retired mechanic bought abandoned alien base to die in, but when the real owner appeared, beginning, Elias Croft had spent his entire life fixing other people's ships. Not flying them. Not exploring the glittering stars the way his customers brag about, but just patching their fuel lines, welding broken hulls, and greasing up hyperdrives in the back alley mechanics of the Perseid colonies. By the time he retired at 68, his hands were callous into stone, his knees creaked like old reactor doors, and he carried the bitterness of a man who had lived in the shadows of others' adventures. He didn't want much anymore. Just silence. Just a place where no starship engines whined and no captains haggled over labor fees. So when he heard through a smuggler's grapevine that there was an abandoned alien facility on the barren moon of Orpheus 9, going dirt cheap at a scrap auction, he bought it with the last of his credits. The place was massive, carved into the obsidian cliffs. The auctioneer called it an ancient relay base, probably Veari origin. Most would-be buyers avoided it because Veari ruins had a reputation. Eerie, half-alive machines, corridors that whispered when no one spoke, and technology so far ahead of humanity that tampered with it often ended with electrocution, implosion, or worse. But Elias wanted none of the base's secrets. He just wanted a tomb, a quiet place to tinker with old parts, cook simple meals, and let his body finally rust down the way old mechanics should. On his first night there, the silence felt almost holy. He set up his cot in the wide central chamber, unpacked a toolbox he knew he'd never really use again, and looked up at the alien ceiling with its faintly glowing sigils. Guess this is it, he muttered to himself. Home till the end. But endings rarely come the way men plan. Middle. The base wasn't dead. Not entirely. Within weeks, Elias noticed small changes. Doors that once jammed now opened smoothly. Lights that hadn't glowed in centuries flickered awake. He shrugged it off at first. Maybe the place still had some automated repair protocols. But then food began appearing. Not from his dwindling rations, but in sealed trays left in the mess hall. Steaming bowls of protein stew, fruit that shimmered faintly as if dipped in starlight. Elias didn't touch it at first. He wasn't suicidal enough to eat glowing alien fruit, but curiosity and hunger got the better of him. To his shock, it was delicious, better than anything the colonies ever served. And it didn't kill him. In fact, his arthritis felt lighter the next morning. That's when he realized he wasn't alone. The signs grew clearer. Faint footsteps in distant halls. Tools he left scattered were neatly arranged when he returned, and one morning, a humming filled the chamber like someone tuning an instrument just out of sight. Elias kept a plasma wrench under his cot after that. He wasn't afraid of dying. He'd come here expecting it. But he wouldn't let himself be toyed with. The truth revealed itself 3 months later. He was working on an old shuttle engine he dragged inside, trying to keep his mind busy, when a voice behind him spoke. You handle tools the way my people handle memory. Carefully, reluctantly, always afraid of what might be lost or broken. Elias spun, wrench raised. The figure that stood in the doorway was no ghost. She was tall, draped in a cloak that shimmered like liquid silver, her skin faintly translucent, showing veins that pulsed with light. Her eyes were the worst, or maybe the best part. Deep pools, as if twin galaxies spun inside them. Elias froze. Veari. The alien inclined her head. This place is mine. You are trespassing. For a long moment, neither spoke. Elias finally lowered the wrench, though his hand trembled. I bought it. At auction. Thought it was abandoned. It was not abandoned, she said, voice calm but heavy with old sorrow. It was mourning. I left it in grief. That does not mean it ceased to belong to me. Elias almost laughed. Figures. Even at the end of my life, I can't find a place nobody wants. The alien tilted her head, studying him with unnerving intensity. You came here to die. Yeah, he admitted. Figured it'd be quiet. Just me and the walls. No one to bother. Something softened in her eyes then. And yet, by being here, you woke it. This base responds to need. To presence. To loneliness. You called and it answered. Elias sat heavily on his stool. So what happens now? You kick me out? She stepped closer, folding her long fingers together. That depends. Would you leave if I asked? Elias looked around. At the glowing walls, at the shuttle engine he'd been fussing with, at the food that had sustained him, and finally at his trembling hands. Truth? Nowhere else to go. A long silence passed. Then she sighed, a sound like wind moving through hollow stone. Then perhaps we share. Her name, Elias learned, was Tyara. She was one of the last of the Veari, a civilization thought long extinct. This base was her refuge after her people scattered and fell silent among the stars. At first, their coexistence was awkward. Elias was gruff, stubborn, and set in his ways. Tyara was precise, formal, and often spoke in riddles. But necessity has a way of softening walls. She showed him how the base's systems worked. Its living architecture, its ability to shape itself to its occupants. He, in turn, taught her about the little things humans did. Seasoning food with salt, humming while repairing an engine, telling half-bitter, half-funny stories of customers who swore they knew better than a mechanic fixing their ships. Sometimes they argued. Elias would curse the flickering lights. She would scold him for calling her people's technology fancy junk. But beneath the quarrels grew an unlikely companionship. One evening, as they shared a strange Viari fruit that pulsed like a beating heart, Tyara asked him, "Why did you never leave your world? Why spend a life fixing ships you never flew?" Elias stared into the fruit's glow. Someone had to keep them running. Didn't trust anyone else to do it right. Guess I thought maybe my work was a way to fly without ever leaving the ground. Tyara regarded him with quiet respect. Among my people, mechanics were revered. To mend was to defy decay. To restore was to create again. He chuckled. First time anyone ever made it sound noble. But peace never lasts. 6 months into their fragile coexistence, the base's outer sensors detected an approaching vessel. Not Viari, not human. Raiders. Scavengers who stripped ruins for black market tech. Elias saw the panic flicker in Tyara's normally calm gaze. "They cannot have this place," she whispered. "If they breach it, they will tear it apart. My people's memory will be sold piece by piece." Elias stood, joints aching but resolve solid. "Then we make sure they don't." The next hours were a blur of preparation. Elias rigged old engines into makeshift traps, while Tyara awakened defense systems that had slumbered for centuries. Together, they turned the silent base into a fortress. When the raiders landed, expecting an empty ruin, they were met with fire, collapsing corridors, and doors that sealed like jaws. Elias fought like a man with nothing left to lose, welding shut passages, overloading conduits. At his side, Tyara unleashed bursts of energy that bent the raiders' weapons into molten slag. In the end, the raiders fled, leaving half their number behind. The base was scarred, but still whole. Elias collapsed against a wall, chest heaving. "Haven't moved like that in 30 years, he groaned. Tyara knelt beside him, placing a luminous hand on his shoulder. "You fought not for yourself, but for what was mine." "Why?" He gave a weary grin. "Because it ain't just yours anymore, is it?" Ending. Time blurred after that. Weeks became months, and Elias no longer counted the days. He was still old, still weary, but the loneliness that had driven him here was gone. He and Tyara became unlikely partners, caretakers of the base, guardians of memory. They shared meals, stories, and even silence in ways that felt whole. Elias often thought he'd come here to die, but somehow he found a reason to live again, even if only for a little while. One evening, as they watched Orpheus 9's barren horizon glow with distant starlight, Tyara spoke softly. "When you first arrived, I thought you a trespasser, a thief of solitude, but you have given me something I thought forever lost." Elias chuckled. "What's that?" "Companionship." For a long moment, Elias couldn't speak. His throat felt too tight. Finally, he said, "Funny, guess you gave me the same thing." He didn't know how much longer his body would last. Months, a year if he was lucky. But for the first time, that didn't scare him. Because when the end did come, he wouldn't face it alone in silence. He'd come to an abandoned alien base to die. Instead, he'd found a home and a friend who turned the end of his story into something worth remembering. And when Elias finally did close his eyes for the last time, Tyara sang an ancient Viarium, her voice carrying through the halls. The base glowed brighter than it ever had, as if honoring the stubborn old mechanic who had come not to steal, not to conquer, but simply to belong.